The fog is lifting. Clarity is calling you forward. Welcome to Forward in Freedom. I'm Tanya Johnson. This is where awareness becomes power. Let's move forward in freedom.
Have you ever been so focused on getting through a difficult season that you almost miss what God was doing while you were living it? That question stayed with me throughout my climb up Mount Kilimanjaro. Like many people, I thought reaching the summit would be the defining moment of the journey. I couldn't have been more mistaken. You see, long before I reached the top, God was already inviting me to see things I never expected to notice. As my pace slowed, my awareness began to grow. I wasn't just covering ground anymore. I was beginning to experience the mountain differently. I found myself noticing things that I would have missed before. The beauty of God's creation, quiet moments, conversations, the changing landscape, remarkable plants. Today, I'd like to invite you back onto that mountain with me, not to relive the climb, not to chase the summit, but to notice what God was quietly revealing all along the path. Because I have a feeling He may be doing the very same thing in your life. So let's go back to the beginning, back to the very first day on the mountain, because that's where this story really begins. Like many people, when I imagined Mount Kilimanjaro, I pictured snow, thin air, the summit. Instead, our first day began in the rainforest. Everything felt alive. Towering trees stretched high above us. The air was cool and rich with moisture. Birds and monkeys filled the forest with sounds that I'd never heard before. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating moments that invited me to slow down and simply take it all in. For a while, I forgot about everything waiting farther up the mountain. I simply enjoyed where I was. And then my guide quietly stopped. He pointed beside the trail and smiled. He said, "Tanya, look." There it was, a vibrant plant unlike anything that I'd ever seen before. Its colorful beauty immediately caught my attention against the rich green backdrop of the rainforest. Then I looked a little closer. Its shape reminded me of the trunk of an elephant, hence the name, the elephant plant. My guide explained that it grows in the rainforest of Tanzania, and I'm so glad that he pointed it out to me because I would have walked right past it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, not because it wasn't remarkable, simply because I wasn't looking for it. That thought stayed with me. How many extraordinary things do we walk past every single day? Not because they aren't there, but because we're simply looking somewhere else. Maybe you've experienced that, not on a mountain, but in life. Maybe you've been so focused on getting through the pain, the grief, the disappointment, the divorce, the uncertainty, or the regret that every day has become about simply surviving until tomorrow. I've been there. And when you're simply trying to survive, your eyes naturally stay fixed on what's next. That's when I found myself asking a different question. Not about the mountain, but about life. What might we be walking past simply because we're focused on getting somewhere else? What might you be walking past lately? A relationship that needs your attention? An opportunity that you've been afraid to pursue? A prayer that God has already begun answering, just differently than you expected? A strength that He's quietly developing in you that you haven't recognized yet? What if, while we're asking God to change tomorrow, He's quietly opening our eyes to what He's already doing today? That simple moment beside the trail changed something in me. From that point forward, I wasn't simply climbing anymore. I was paying attention, not just to the destination, but to the journey. Poly Poly had already slowed my pace. Now God was slowing my perspective, teaching me to notice, to wonder, to appreciate. Because sometimes His greatest reminders aren't hidden. They're quietly waiting beside the path until we're moving slowly enough to see them. That little plant never changed. That trail never changed. The rainforest never changed. What changed was me. The trail was the same. The mountain was the same. God's presence was the same. What changed was what I was finally able to see. That first day really caught my attention, not because of how far we had trekked, but because of what had begun noticing. And from that point on, I found myself looking at the mountain differently, not just walking, but observing, not just climbing, but appreciating. The more I slowed down, the more I noticed. And with each new day, another part of God's creation seemed to capture my attention. The journey itself had become part of the gift. A few days later, another unusual plant caught my attention. Unlike the elephant plant, this one looked almost prehistoric. And naturally, my curiosity got the best of me. So I asked my guide about it. He smiled and said, "Many people call it the forever plant." I reached out and gently touched the bloom. I'll admit, I wasn't expecting what I felt. It almost felt like plastic. I smiled and I quietly thought, well, that certainly doesn't feel like a flower. I even wondered, is that why it's called the forever plant? Whether that's where the name came from or not, I'll always remember that forever plant. As I stood there, I admired how perfectly it had been created for the environment where it lived. Its design fit exactly where God had placed it. And that made me wonder, how often do we spend our energy asking God to change our season when He may already be preparing us to flourish within it? Looking back over my own life, there were seasons that I would never have chosen. Yet many of those same seasons quietly developed strength, patience, faith, and perseverance that I would need later. Sometimes we don't understand a season while we're living it. Only later do we recognize how God has been preparing us one faithful step at a time. Maybe that's where you find yourself today, not asking God to remove the mountain, but wondering why you're climbing it in the first place. And perhaps the better question isn't, God, why am I here? Perhaps it's, Lord, what are you developing in me while I'm here? That time discovering the forever plant stayed with me. And from then on, I found myself paying even closer attention to the details around me. It seemed as though every new day revealed something I hadn't noticed before. One of those discoveries happened a few days later. Earlier in the climb, I had photographed another fascinating plant. Its leaves were stretched wide open, reaching toward the daylight. I thought it was beautiful. I took a few pictures and continued trekking. Several days later, higher on the mountain, I noticed another one, except this one looked completely different. Its leaves were tightly folded together. almost as if it were protecting something precious. I stopped, looked at it a little closer, and then I asked my guide, "Why does this one look so different?" He smiled and reminded me of the one I had photographed several days earlier, and then he helped me to make the connection. During the warmth of the day, the lobelia opens, but when temperatures drop below freezing at night, it closes itself, protecting what's inside it. I just stood there, taking it in. What an incredible design. There are seasons for opening and there are seasons for protecting. There are seasons for reaching outward and there are seasons for becoming still. Not because we're giving up, but because growth often happens quietly. That little plant wasn't afraid of winter. It simply knew that winter wouldn't last forever. And neither do the winters we experience in life. Grief, disappointment, waiting, uncertainty, heartbreak. Those seasons can feel endless while we're living them, but they are still seasons, and seasons change. Those discoveries became a part of the rhythm of the climb. Each day brought a different landscape, a different elevation, a different perspective. The mountain kept changing, and so did I. Of course, not every part of Mount Kilimanjaro looked like a postcard. There were rocky paths, loose footing, steep climbs, cold mornings, thin air, moments that demanded every bit of my attention. Yet when I think back, those difficult places aren't the first memories that come to mind. I remember the beauty between them, the laughter, the conversations, the changing scenery, the quiet moments that invited me to stop, look around, and simply breathe. Maybe that's true of life too. Perhaps one day when this season is behind you, it won't be the hardship that you remember most. Maybe you'll remember the grace that carried you through it. Day by day, step by step, the summit drew closer, and before I knew it, the morning that we had all been working toward had finally arrived. Summit Day. We reached Uhuru Peak, the highest mountain on Mount Kilimanjaro. What makes the name especially meaningful is that Uhuru is the Swahili word for freedom. I couldn't help but smile, standing at a place called freedom, while recording a podcast called Forward in Freedom. That felt like one of those beautiful moments that only God could have arranged. We celebrated, we hugged, I thanked God. Then I simply stood there, looking across the clouds and the glaciers and the breathtaking beauty of His creation. For a few moments, I stood there in awe. Even though my time at the summit lasted only a few minutes, I knew I was experiencing a moment that I would never forget. But on Kilimanjaro, you don't stay at the summit very long. The altitude is extreme. The oxygen level is much lower. The weather changes quickly. Your body simply isn't designed to remain there for an extended period. So after only a few minutes, it was time to begin the descent. As we started back down the mountain, another thought quietly settled into my heart. We spend so much of life chasing mountaintop moments. Yet, we were never meant to live there. The summit is where we celebrate, where we worship, where we pause. And then life invites us to keep walking. The valleys aren't forever either. Winter eventually gives way to spring. and healing slowly begins where pain once lived. One season makes room for another. Months of preparation, days of climbing, cold nights, early mornings, thousands of faithful steps, all leading to a summit experience that lasts only a few minutes. And that's when it struck me. The summit wasn't the greatest gift. The person God was shaping throughout the journey, that was the greater miracle. Uhuru Peak gave me a beautiful moment of freedom. But the journey toward Uhuru showed me what it truly means to keep moving forward in freedom. Eventually, every journey comes to an end. The fights home were behind me, the gear had been unpacked, and life slowly settled back into its familiar rhythm. And one afternoon, I found myself scrolling through the hundreds of pictures and the video clips from the mountain, and I smiled. Those images had become more than memories. They had become reminders. Reminders of conversations, reminders of beauty, reminders of laughter, reminders that God's presence wasn't reserved for the summit. He had been faithfully walking beside me through the rainforest, along the rocky paths, during the freezing nights, and in every ordinary step in between. Looking back, I realized the summit didn't change me. It only confirmed the work that God had been doing all along. And maybe that's his invitation to all of us, not simply to keep moving forward, but to move forward with open eyes. Because when we slow down long enough to notice, we often discover he has been walking alongside us all along. Here's this week's Freedom Nugget. The summit is a milestone. The journey is what transforms you. Never underestimate what God is doing while you're still climbing. If today's conversation encouraged you, subscribe, share this episode, and join the conversation below. I love to continue the conversation with you. And as you reflect on today's conversation, what's one unexpected blessing you've discovered in a season that was originally difficult? Share your story in the comments. I look forward to reading it. And as we close today, I'd like to leave you with this freedom blessing. May God give you eyes to notice his presence in both the mountaintops and the valleys. May he strengthen your heart for the season that you're walking through. May he remind you that winter never lasts forever, that healing is possible, and that every faithful step matters. May you continue moving forward, not in fear, but in faith, not in hurry, but in hope. And may you discover the freedom that comes from trusting the one who has been walking beside you all along. Thank you, Lord. Before we go, there's one final chapter from Tanzania that I can't wait to bring you next week. One part of this journey has stayed with me long after I returned home. It wasn't a place, it was the people, the guide, the porters, the fellow trekkers. Their encouragement, perseverance, and quiet strength left a lasting impression on me, and I look forward to telling you that part of the story next week. Remember, freedom isn't found only at the summit. Sometimes it's discovered one step at a time. I'm Tanya J, and this is the work of moving forward in freedom.